this mess, but more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. I'll be joining you live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin tonight, where the big debate takes place tomorrow between the presidential hopefuls. Donald Trump will not be here, but he still seems to dominate headlines, hey, on both sides of the pond. We'll also look at an outbreak of sectarian violence that took place in Derby over the weekend. We'll ask, has the politics of the subcontinent come to England? And we'll also look at a school in Hull in East Yorkshire where sexually explicit material was shown to 4-year-old kids. We'll talk to a parent who withdrew their child from the school. All of that coming up, but first, let's get the news headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. A former Met Police officer has been jailed for 16 years for raping a 16-year-old girl and a female police officer. Adam Provan raped a colleague 6 times and terrorised her so she feared for her life over a 3-year period. He also raped a teenager twice in 2010. Lauren Taylor was a child when he raped her. Now 29, she waived her anonymity to speak out against his crimes.
I was 22 when I finally reported it, and I think being a victim of this kind of crime, I feel like sometimes, you know, you don't really know yourself what you've been through. I don't think I went home, and I don't think it was until the year after it happened that I told someone about it, and they told me, you know, it was rape. I obviously was really upset telling them and sharing it, but I don't think I'd ever really fully understood what happened to me.
Judges will be given new powers to force convicted prisoners to hear their sentencing. GB News can reveal the government's introducing new measures to stop criminals like Lucy Letby from refusing to go to court. Yesterday, the serial baby killer didn't have to listen to impact statements from her victims' parents. The plans will be unveiled in the King's Speech in November. There are warnings the UK's migrant crisis is likely to be significantly worse by the next general election. Think tank, the Institute for Public Policy Research, says any incoming government faces a perma-backlog of thousands of new asylum seekers needing long-term accommodation and support. Researchers warn the annual housing costs for the backlog could soar to over £5 billion after 5 years. And all 8 people have now been rescued from the stranded cable car in Pakistan. That's according to the country's Interior Ministry. Earlier, the army was forced to abandon efforts to save them by helicopter because of poor light. The children and their teacher were travelling to school when a cable snapped this morning, leaving them suspended 900 feet in the air. And the chair of the Northern Ireland Policing Board says an independent review has been commissioned following the recent data breaches. The details of serving officers and PSNI staff were published online by mistake earlier this month. A number of other data breaches have since come to light, including the loss of a police officer's laptop and notebook. The board's chair, Deirdre Toner, says steps are being taken to help rebuild trust. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Nigel.
Good evening, I'm live in Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin. Here we are on the Great Lakes. It's high summer. It's a town famous for its breweries, among many other things. Not that I've been to one just yet, I promise you. And tomorrow there'll be 8 presidential hopefuls on the stage making their pitch to become the Republican candidate for the next president of the USA. One man will be missing. Yep, Donald Trump is about 45 points ahead in the polls within the party and has decided on that basis he's not going to come. But the fact that he's not here doesn't mean that he's not all present, because he is. There's always drama whether Trump appears or whether he doesn't. And we heard the news last night that he is going to have to present himself on Thursday to a jailhouse in Fulton County in the state of Georgia, where he's going to face 41 criminal counts along with 18 others co-defendants. Incredibly, he's being asked to put up a $200,000 bail bond, as if he was going to flee the country. I mean, how on earth would he do it? The whole thing's incredible, but Prosecutor Willis appears to be overtly political in so many ways, and yet perhaps of all the challenges that Donald Trump faces, this one in Georgia is by far the most tricky, by far the most difficult, and because it's happening at a state level, not a federal level, he wouldn't be able, if he won the election, to pardon himself. Whether this all comes to trial, what a jury would decide, those things, of course, are far from certain. And yet, it seems that with every single new legal action against him, somehow his support becomes stronger within the Republican Party. Whether that reaches out to the undecideds in America, I guess, will be the great test as November 2024 approaches. Well, joining me now is Carrie Lake, of course herself, a very well-known TV presenter and ran recently to be governor of Georgia. Carrie, do you think it's a mistake Donald Trump not coming to Milwaukee?
No, I don't think it is, actually. You know, you said he's 45 points up. I just saw a poll today out of Louisiana. He's 65 points up from his next competitor, if you can even call these people competitors. This is a job interview, and he's already proven he can do the job because he was on the job. He had America in the best shape we've ever been in. We were on a solid footing on the world stage. Right now with Joe Biden, we're marching toward World War III. We have a guy in Joe Biden who can't even show compassion for the people of Hawaii after Maui burned.
Is this when he sort of walked past the questions and said no comment?
No comment, and then he was there yesterday and he fell asleep during one of the ceremonies they were having for the victims. He used the time to talk about himself. The people of America are tired of Joe Biden. They don't like what he's selling, and they don't like the way the directions of this country is going. I don't think Trump needs to be here. I get that, Carrie. I don't think he needs to be here in order to prove his worth.
I think within the party I get that. But there are people out there, and I've been to many Trump rallies, there are people out there that love Donald Trump. I mean, he's a hero to them. But equally, there are quite a lot in the middle, you know, who you need to vote for you, who perhaps aren't convinced by him. Does this debate tomorrow, and does the pick for vice presidential candidate. How much do you think that matters?
Do you think it's a good idea for him to walk onto a debate stage with a network that is pushing the globalist agenda, with a network that's already backed, basically,
this is Fox News, yeah?
Fox News? They've already made it very clear by the way they're operating that they're for DeSantis or anybody but Trump. And you know he's going to be facing Bret Baier, lobbing a bunch of BS questions at him, trying to get him. And who knows with these...
I get the point. I get the point that Donald Trump doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
I get the point that if it wasn't Bret Baier, it'd be, well, certainly Chris Christie would be throwing all sorts of problems his way. And I get it. But my question, does this debate tomorrow still matter?
I don't think it does, actually, because he has gone and done something so brilliant that people won't even be talking about this debate. I have been in town for a couple days now. I've done dozens of interviews about the debate, and nobody's ever asked me about these other guys. All they ask about is Trump. In my opinion, he's already won the debate. He doesn't need to be there with people who are polling at 2 and 6.
I get that point. But the point I'm making, Carrie, my view is that in 2016, when the horrible Billy Bush tapes came out and Trump was in trouble with many of his traditional supporters, actually, at that moment in time, having Mike Pence as the VP candidate, a committed, born-again Christian, actually helped to shore up that base with evangelical voters, Southern Baptists. So I kind of think that who the VP choice is does matter. Do you?
Well, I don't think he's going to be talking about VP choice, and that's even going to come up tomorrow. We're talking about should he be at the debate.
No, I'm not. I've moved on from that.
Oh, you have?
No. I'm saying, does the pick of VP matter? Because I think it does.
I think President Trump is so strong that I know that when it comes time for him to choose the VP, which will probably be about a year from now, he's going to look at the playing field and say, where do I need help? Do I need help with this group of voters? Do I need help with that group of voters? Do I need help in this state, in that state? And I trust that he will choose an incredible VP, and whomever that is, I will go into the voting booth and vote excitingly to vote for that person.
It's said by many, Carrie Lake, that your name is among the list of runners and riders for that position.
Well, I don't know that it is. I mean, people have asked me about that, and the news has reported on it, but I haven't had that conversation with President Trump. I do think President Trump knows that I will do anything I can to help him win, because I want President Trump to win selfishly for my children. I have an almost 19-year-old son and a 20-year-old daughter. I'm so worried about their future. I'm worried about the future of America, and I know that President Trump is the man for the moment to help usher us through these difficult times.
And do you think the long list of charges that's mounting up, how does that affect people in the middle? You know, we know the way the Democrat base will view it. We know the way the Republican base will view it. What about those folk out there that are busy with jobs and mortgages and bringing up families who aren't very political? But do they look at all this stuff? Does it put them off President Trump? Or does it make them think there's a sort of sense of injustice here?
I can't help but think that people who are struggling, they're in the middle, they're not very political, they're realizing, oh my goodness, my life is not as good as it was 3 and 4 years ago under President Trump. They're not liking the direction Joe Biden's going, and then they're watching as Biden is weaponizing our government against his opponent. And they're realizing this is just not fair. Whether they love President Trump or don't, they're looking at the way these indictments are coming down, and it always happens to be 12, 24 hours after some terrible news comes out about the Biden crime family, another indictment, another charge, that even people in the middle are going, wait a minute, this just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up.
When it comes to it, I mean, whatever legal situation Trump's in, he is going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm going to speak to a pollster in a minute to see whether there's even a possibility of anybody else. Do you really believe that Joe Biden is going to be the Democrat candidate next year?
I've heard people say that the Democrats will find a way to get away from him because they're realizing that he's a dumpster fire. And there's no way to salvage anything that he's done, because every decision he's made has put America in a weaker and weaker and weaker position. Our economy is faltering. We're not energy independent.
So who else have they got?
I've heard that Gavin Newsom is actually raising money into a federal PAC. Quite a bit of money.
And this is the guy who's the governor of
This is the guy who is destroying California as we speak. This is the guy who locked down the beaches, locked people in their homes, destroyed businesses, masked our children. and is pushing an agenda that Americans don't want.
Unlike Ron DeSantis, who actually handled the crisis in Florida, I thought, brilliantly.
I think we had one governor who handled it brilliantly, and her name was Kristi Noem. Ron DeSantis likes to tell people he handled it brilliantly, but when you look around and you realize that the very first pastor arrested for holding church service under COVID, who just bucked the restrictions and said, no, we are going to have our First Amendment right. We will worship and we will hold a church service. He was arrested in Florida. A lot of people were arrested in Florida, and
I was there.
DeSantis shut down the beaches for a bit.
I was in Florida when the UK was locked down, and it was a blooming sight better in Florida
So
than it
you're
was
saying
in the UK.
because it wasn't as bad as the UK.
No. It's all relative. It's all relative, and I get that.
But Governor Newsom shut down the beaches as well.
Has DeSantis been a good governor?
I really think he's been good in some ways, but he did something so terrible to the voters. He ran for office, and immediately upon taking office, he said, I want a second term. I want to be your governor. And immediately upon taking office, he started to run for president.
Well,
I think that the people don't appreciate that.
One thing, Carrie, for certain, there are some divisions within the Republican Party, but that's politics. And we'll see you again on the campaign trail.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
joining
much.
us. Well, I made the comment there a moment ago that Trump is absolutely miles ahead when you ask registered Republicans who they're going to vote for to be their nominee. But I wonder, events are funny things. Could things change? Is there anybody else in the pack? And we talked there very much. We talked there very much about Governor DeSantis, but we didn't mention an outsider. And there is an outsider. There is a new boy in this race who I kind of think is interesting. Now, we'll see how Vivek Ramaswamy performs tomorrow. He's never been in politics before, so there's inexperience, but he's certainly got experience of being in business, and he's done pretty well. He's saying some interesting things, but does he actually stand even half a chance? Well, James Johnson is co-founder of JL Partners, of course a former advisor to Theresa May. James, spreading your wings here from UK into American politics and polling. Trump clearly miles in the lead.
Yeah, Trump is very far in the lead. In national polls, he's on 55%, 60%. He's at the moment very much the front runner to get the nomination. But if you look at some of the early primary states, Iowa, the Iowa caucus, New Hampshire, his support is a little bit lower. So it's a little worse when you look at those early states, but no doubt he's in the advantage, and he's going to dominate this debate. They're all going to be talking about it.
As I said, whether Trump's here or not, so I mean, his presence is going to get felt strongly on that stage and elsewhere. Are there enough people who are open-minded that something could shift, something could change?
So, not really. There's a small number. It's only about 10% undecided, so very small. Most people know their view of Trump. What's interesting is the 50% of the primary electorate that aren't saying Trump. And the problem is for those trying to beat Trump in this race is it's all looking a little bit like 2016. You're going to see on that stage tonight there's 8 people vying to be the anti-Trump candidate, and that's a gift.
Well, actually, you say that, but it's not quite true, is it? Because I've just mentioned a moment ago in the introduction before you came on, this character that I find fascinating, Vivek Ramaswamy. I met him earlier in the year. I've kept in touch with him. We're going to talk to him after the debate here on GB News. He's actually quite pro-Trump, isn't he?
He's pro-Trump, but he's also trying to put out there that he's the ultimate successor. He's the sensible successor to Trump. He's the person that can do Trumpism with a professional face. And it's always bad as a pollster to try and predict things. I just wonder whether he might come out as the winner of this debate. He's quite unknown. He's very versatile on the debate stage. He's very punchy. He doesn't do regurgitated lines that people hate politicians doing these days. He could just
I mean, and even in the polling, and the polling varies hugely, but even in the polling it would appear that he's actually pretty much in some cases almost neck and neck with Ron DeSantis, who was seen to be the very clear front runner, and even some opinion polls, perhaps surprisingly, and maybe on very small samples, but some opinion polls putting him ahead. So I wonder whether, and okay, I've just talked to Carrie Lake, and we've mentioned Kristi Noem, another state governor who's popular, but I kind of wonder, James Johnson, is tomorrow almost an audition who's going to be the vice presidential candidate?
Well, I think Donald Trump will be looking at this lineup of candidates and thinking, I don't want any of that lot. These are the ones that he thinks have betrayed him by going on this stage. I think he'll be looking away from that lot. There's too much bad blood with him and Ron DeSantis. Yes. You know, a lot of candidates are standing against him. Some of the less known voices, like Asa Hutchinson, as well as Doug Burgum, are very, very anti-Trump. I wonder whether actually it's the Carrie Lakes of this world that Trump might be looking at, someone who's not involved in this race.
She was very coy a moment ago when I asked her whether she was...
Well, we did a poll we did polls in Iowa and New Hampshire recently, and amongst Trump voters, she and Vivek Ramaswamy were the top two choices to be Trump's VP. So there's definitely that support for Carrie Lake, support for Vivek Ramaswamy, and a couple of other people out there as well.
No, that is interesting. And I mentioned the question to Carrie, and I mentioned it to you. I mean, it's pretty clear what happened in Hawaii yesterday. I mean, Sleepy Joe was the name that Trump gave him, but it's now becoming literally Sleepy Joe. You know, the guy's 80, he's clearly not all that well, and I mean, literally, if you go to an event to commemorate the death of 300 people who fall asleep, it's not good. Who is there in Democrat polling?
There's very few. The most likely potential challenger would be Gavin Newsom. He's the current governor of California. He's actually going up against DeSantis in a debate in November. But a lot of people don't want to go up against Joe Biden. The Democrats aren't very ruthless. They don't want to go and step over the thing. Over the last year, I spoke to a number of Democratic strategists, and they were all saying, we've got to get Joe Biden out. He's too old. We've got to have new blood to beat Trump or whoever it might be. Now they're not saying that, now that he's announced his re-election campaign. We asked voters what their number one word is to sum up Joe Biden, and it's old. And the second most cited word, incompetent. So that is getting through to voters, and it's really going to hurt him in a way that it didn't in 2020.
It's not a very popular cocktail, is it really? No. Well, at least what I would say to you, James Johnson, is unlike the United Kingdom, at least there are genuine policy choices that exist between the two parties in America. Rather less so, I fear, in the UK. James, thank you. And we'll talk to you a lot more. And we're going to be here in America a lot as GB News between now and that presidential election in 2024. It's a huge story, not just in America, but hey, let's face it, America is the leader of the free world. In a moment, after the break, we look at a rather disturbing story. Sectarianism, subcontinental sectarianism on the streets of Derby over the weekend. All of that in just a minute.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
United Kingdom, Kabaddi. I wonder whether you've heard of this sport. It's up to 4,000 years old, and yes, it comes from the Indian subcontinent. From what I can make out, it's kind of a bit like a subcontinental form of British Bulldog, is about the nearest analogy that I can draw to it. And there was a game that was being played this weekend up in Derby, a ticketed game, a lot of people there, and it turned really, really ugly. The finger of blame is being put on Khalistani extremists, and these are a Sikh group who have used violence in recent years, who want an independent, separate Sikh homeland. Have a look at these video footages of what happened in Derby over the weekend. So, you know, you can see people charging around, there's lots of aggression. We're told, it's not been confirmed, we're told that gunshots were fired. Certainly there were people there with swords, brandishing swords. I mean, this is worrying. Now, I've said before on this programme that the politics of the subcontinent is coming to the streets of the UK, and we saw this in Leicester last summer, and this indeed is what we've seen, I believe, in Derby over the weekend. And I'll be honest with you, I'd heard very little about the Khalistani movement until just a few weeks ago. Well, Wazeek is an associate fellow on the Centre for Radicalisation and Terrorism at our friends the Henry Jackson Society, and Wazeek joins me down the line now. Wazeek, help us. As I said, I hadn't really heard much about this Khalistani movement. Can you please just inform our viewers?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Nigel. So the Khalistani movement is a movement mainly based around Sikhism, and it is a fringe element of Sikhs who are looking to create their own state within the Punjab region of India, and to actually annex it away from India. And now what we've seen here in Derby is that some of that influence and some of what has been happening over in Punjab seems to have been spilled over, because we've seen evidence of Khalistani flags there. And not only that, we've seen also some of the weapons that have been used, for example, swords, metal rods, and axes, and apparently also gunshots being fired. Now, this is really, really serious, and the British government, the Home Office, need to take this quite seriously, because it seems to have gone under the radar, because a lot of resources have been perhaps given too much to the far right, for example.
Well, look, you know, it certainly wasn't on my radar, as I say, until very, very recently. Would it be fair, would it be reasonable, and tell me either way, to describe some of the methods that the Khalistani movement have used in the subcontinent? Would it be fair to describe them as a terrorist organisation, or is that going a step too far?
Not necessarily. There will be elements of it that can meet the threshold of our definition of terrorism, so based on the Terrorism Act 2000. So if they are looking to pursue a political cause and use violence to achieve those aims, then yes, they would be meeting the threshold of terrorism. Now, there are certain within the Khalistani movement who have been prescribed as terrorist groups. For example, Baba Khalsa have been prescribed as a terrorist group. So what we need to do is we need to figure out what happened in Derby. Was that actually a political movement through the use of violence? And if so, we need to look to find out who the main perpetrators are and start using our laws to bring them to account.
Yes, I agree with that. But there's one other element here that hasn't been debated or discussed anywhere, but I think it's worthy of mention, and that is this. What we've seen over the course of this year are a much larger number of Sikhs crossing the English Channel in those dinghies. Now, I do not know, I haven't got a clue whether some of those that are coming could be associated with this Khalistani movement. Do you know anything about that? And what on earth should we do? Because surely we need to know.
Well, absolutely. I think anyone who comes into our country, into Great Britain, we need to know who they are. We need to know if they have a criminal past. And as soon as we do, we need to be able to use our laws appropriately and proportionately to deal with them. Now, just based on some of the people who have come, not necessarily Sikhs, but just generally who have come over from other countries, over 200 of them have been sent back, and they were foreign national offenders. 30 of them were asylum offenders, and 85 of them were non-asylum offenders. And 15 of them had actually come from the small boats crisis that we're currently dealing with. And that is a major security issue that we're facing. So it's not just Khalistani extremists that we're going to be dealing with. We're also going to be dealing with Romanian drug gangsters who have come in 2017. I don't know if your viewers remember, there was a gang war that was taking place in East London when one of them was killed. So we do have a really difficult task on our hand, and we do need to secure our borders and know who's coming in.
No, I get that. Wazeek, thank you for joining us again here on GB News. And it's a funny thing, but if you talk about those that are coming into the country illegally, and you talk about their association with criminal gangs, you talk about potential links, in some cases proven, to terrorism, you are shouted down, you are condemned, you are the most awful human being on earth. And yet, I've always thought the biggest single problem we face with what's happening in the English Channel, frankly, is the threat of terrorism, is the threat to our national security. In a moment, a Buy British initiative, something that couldn't really happen all the while we were members of the single market. It's being supported by 100 members of Parliament, and we'll be joined in a moment by the Black Farmer, Wilfred Emmanuel Jones.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Radio.
Hundred members of Parliament have written to the big supermarkets to say, given that so many people now, of course, do shop online and you see delivery vans absolutely everywhere, to say to them on their websites, let's have a special Buy British section. Let's encourage consumers to buy British cherries when they're in season rather than imported ones. And I guess it's something that our farmers, our smallholders, our fishermen and others would actively encourage. I was always amused during our years of membership of the European Economic Community and then the European Union, that of course we couldn't do that because that would be discriminating against other members of the single market. So is there potentially a Brexit benefit here for British farming and for British fishing? And is this a good positive move? Well, 100 MPs have signed it, including some very senior figures like Hilary Benn from the Labour Party. I think they're absolutely right. I believe it is a step in the right direction, but will it really make any difference? Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by a friend of the programme, Wilfred Emmanuel Jones, MBE, entrepreneur, and of course, the black farmer. Wilfred, welcome back to the programme. Is this a good initiative?
This is a fantastic initiative, Nigel. I must say, I do like those shades. You look really cool in your sunglasses. I just thought, God, that looks good. It's a fantastic initiative. And I just think that I would like to see the supermarkets go much further than just actually having a page on their website and explaining to consumers to buy British. I think it should extend to be actually in the supermarkets themselves, because one of the problems I think we have in this industry is that the supermarkets are the gatekeepers to the relationship with the people who produce foods and farmers. And I've just come back, believe it or not, from the Netherlands, and I like to go and look at supermarkets when I'm in other countries. And what was really interesting is that packs of their products had faces of the actual farmers on pack, which again helps the consumer to have a relationship with the people who are producing their foods. What might surprise you is that people who buy the Black Farmer brand will see that I'm carrying the Union Jack, holding up high. And I can remember when I launched that, people just thought actually that I was being jingoistic, that I'm there holding this flag proudly. But I think food is so important to us that this is something that the supermarket should be doing and sort of encouraging. So I think all of the MPs should be signing this, and a lot more needs to be there to help the consumers make the choice, because I fundamentally believe that if consumers had the choice to choose between buying something that is British or something that is imported, they would buy British all of the time. But Nigel, the other thing I'd like to say is this, is that what we mustn't forget is that most of the food that we consume in this country is consumed outside the home. And therefore, there's a lot more that could be done in what they call food service than with the supermarkets. And most of the food that is imported actually goes into food service. I would bet you that if you're buying your sandwich or you're getting a sandwich from a work canteen or somewhere like that, that would be flown over from the likes of Poland and Thailand. There's a lot more we should be demanding from those in food service to be supporting British farmers, and they're getting away with it because all too often the focus is on supermarkets.
No, I get that, and the idea that you buy your chicken sandwich from a well-known chain,
I've lost
and it's actually
sound,
been
by the
imported
way.
from Thailand. I think people deserve to know. Wilfred's struggling to hear me. Wilfred, can you hear me?
I think I
think I've lost. Okay, I was just saying, I agree with... No, we've lost Sam with Wilfred. Never mind, we had him for a short period of time, and he's absolutely brilliant. I love him. I love his passion for British farming. It's absolutely superb. And I have to say, his products and his sausages are really very, very good indeed, as is the vodka that he produces. So he's a proper entrepreneur. Now, ULEZ, it's all happening. Yep. It's going to come in next Tuesday, that greater extended zone around the outside of London. And there's just way too much talk that it's affecting people living in or especially on the edges of Greater London and those on lower incomes generally who've got cars that don't qualify. And we're not talking anything like enough. You know, we were up in Luton, which is a fair way from London, doing a Farage at Large some time ago, and a lot of people there, particularly sole traders, running their own delivery vans, really concerned about this extra £12.50 a day cost. With, by the way, as we've learnt this week, absolutely no difference to air quality whatsoever. So it's very, very interesting to see the council leader of Hertfordshire, Richard Roberts, has said he will not have any signs put up in Hertfordshire saying you're entering a ULEZ zone. He says to do so would be in fact to condone Sadiq Khan's plan. Only trouble with it is, if you drive across the border and get fined £12.50, you could argue you hadn't been warned. But I understand what Richard Roberts is trying to do. Now, I've got Wilfred back on the line. Wilfred, as ever, farming and politics very close together. There are stories we've had from the Netherlands, where you've just been, we're getting from Ireland, that actually, as part of our effort to combat climate change, farmers are going to be asked to make big reductions in livestock. Do you believe that to be true?
Well, I don't know whether it's true or not, but I think it's going to be a mistake. And I think the thing that we all have to learn is the lesson that the Ukraine and Russian conflict has demonstrated, is that if you think you're going to be able to feed a nation by relying on export, you could end up in a very, very vulnerable situation. And I would like to see the government put a lot more emphasis in making sure that our food chain is very secure. And the only way you're going to do that is by encouraging more entrepreneurs to go into farming, and for people to see that actually the food should be really at the top of our agenda, and all too often it's very, very low down, and I would like to see that changed.
I agree with that, Wilfred. Thank you. I think one thing the Ukraine war has shown us is that energy security and food security really do matter. Well, in a moment, we'll head back to the Crooked House pub, remember? The one that was mysteriously had a fire and then was knocked down. And we'll also talk to a parent from a school in Hull, a preschool in Hull, who's withdrawn his 4-year-old child because of inappropriate sexual material. All of that after a short break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
You remember the story of the Crooked House pub, yeah? That building that was put up in 1765 just outside Dudley in the West Midlands, and mysteriously it had a fire. And then, within moments it seemed, the wrecking ball had come in to demolish it, and there were alternative plans for the site. Well, there's an inspiration that those that want to see that rebuild have got, and it is the Carlton Tavern in Maida Vale in London. Now, this pub had survived attacks by Zeppelins, had survived the Blitz in World War II. Mysteriously, a wrecking ball arrived and knocked it down. There were plans, unscrupulous plans to redevelop it, and after much protest, it was rebuilt brick by brick. And that's the inspiration that people have got at the Crooked House pub. Now, as trucks attempt to move in to clear away the rubble, we have local protesters sitting in the road. They want their community pub back. Jack Carson, our West Midlands reporter, gives us a live update right now from the scene.
Yeah, good evening, Nigel. Here at the site of the Crooked House, as you mentioned, those professional demolition teams moved in last night. Locals here protested the moving in of those diggers. Lots of worries from local people here that they were, of course, going to start taking those bricks away, those bricks that these people here are campaigning to have this place rebuilt brick by brick, not wanting to lose anything from this site. Of course, there's been lots of meetings with local MP Mark Longy and, of course, Sir Gavin Williamson as well. The council very heavily involved in this as well as, of course, these campaign teams. Paul Turner joins me from one of the campaigns to save this Crooked House. Paul, tell me a little bit about what's kind of changed in the last couple of weeks in this whole campaign.
Well, there's been a lot of concern about what was actually going to happen with the site, and that concern got raised to a crescendo yesterday when diggers moved in, and people were worried that we were going to lose all the original material, which we would hope would be available for a rebuild. What's happened over the last 24 hours is that we've actually been able to speak to the people. We've spoken to the contractors. I had a meeting this morning. The contracts were good, they didn't have to, but they were good enough to wait until after my meeting with them before they started work. They didn't have to do that. They'd met with the council had agreed the work, but they wanted to reassure us as a campaign group, they wanted to reassure us that things were going to happen in a way that would make us happier. So I sat down with them this morning, had a meeting. They showed me the method statement. I met with the owner of the construction company and the person who's acting as the sort of overseeing the whole thing from a risk management company. And they reassured me and they told me everything that was going to be done. And there have been various statements released today in various places by different authorities and by me to say that what they're doing, and what they're basically doing is they're going to carefully remove bricks. clean those bricks, put them aside on pallets. Any waste that's going to be taken from the site is going to be left for the council to inspect before it's taken off site.
Yeah, so how reassuring is that then? Because of course we know your campaign to get this rebuilt brick by brick. Of course there were those sit-in protests last night. There are still people here around us here making sure, watching these people go about their work. How reassured are you that they're keeping to their word and they're keeping to what they've told you in these meetings today?
I'm reassured. I mean, I've got their phone numbers. They've sending me photographs of what's going on. I've just had a photograph sent to me by the owner of Putnam. They're keeping me informed. They've given me free access to, and I can go and meet with them at any point. I can call them at any point, and they're going to keep us updated. They've come out to the gate here, to the fence here, and spoken to people and shown them videos, because one person complained, I can't see what's happening around the corner there. So he went and got video and brought it back to show her. So they're doing everything they can to make sure that people are reassured.
And when it comes to the campaign, I mean, what as a group have you come together to decide what ultimately is the next step for you now as a campaign?
Well, it's very difficult to know exactly what order the steps are going to be in, because there's still a lot of legal stuff to sort, there's a lot of planning stuff to sort. We're waiting for the council to do various things which we don't have full understanding of exactly what's going on. So we're waiting for updates on various things, but the ultimate aim is to have the Crooked House back there as close as possible to the original Crooked House.
All right, Paul, thank you so much for joining us this evening. As you can hear from Paul speaking there and the people surrounding us, this campaign is still very active, and these people trying to save the Crooked House.
Jack Carson, great report. I have to say, I'm on the side of the protesters. We want to see that pub rebuilt brick by brick. Whether they can replace the crookedness remains to be seen. Now, let's go to Hull in East Yorkshire. I hope you're sitting down. I find this story pretty shocking. You see, Will and Maria Taylor have a 4-year-old daughter who was in nursery school. She was then shown, as part of Pride Month, material that I think most of you will think was highly inappropriate. Yeah, it's actually gay bondage stuff. And quite why we think it's appropriate to show this to 4-year-old kids, I simply don't know. I think Will Taylor, who joins me down the line, took much the same view. Will, could you believe your daughter was being shown this stuff?
No, I absolutely couldn't. Thank you, Nigel, for having us on. I had to go and see it for myself. So another parent sent us images through WhatsApp saying, have you seen what's in this book? This is horrific. And so the following day, without hesitation, I took my daughter to nursery, and I honestly assumed that the nursery would just admit a mistake, that they would just apologize and say, oh, we're so sorry, we didn't spot that, and just be highly embarrassed. But what actually happened next just truly horrified me. People that I had trusted with the education of both my son and my daughter, people I've known for years, started to say to me that these images were completely appropriate. Appropriate because they said the child would not see it as erotic. They said, you can see it as erotic, and that's your opinion. You're an adult. That's your perception. We can see it as erotic because we're adults, but a child doesn't know any better, and therefore it's okay. They'll just see it as a form of dress up. And they actually compared it to dressing up like a princess on night in shining armor. And I spent 45 minutes trying to get this across to them, bearing in mind that within 60 seconds, the safeguarding lead just stormed off, upset and offended at me raising a safeguarding concern. But I spent 45 minutes trying to explain to them that there are lots of things that we can do as adults which a child might not understand. For example, I might use a swear word, which is inappropriate, but the child doesn't understand it. That doesn't make it okay. If Jimmy Savile decided to get his todger out and start to gratify himself in front of the child, I dare say a 3 or 4-year-old child wouldn't understand what was going on, but that doesn't make that okay. So within minutes,
I'm not sure that imagery is quite what we need, but Will, I get it. And so you chose to take your daughter out of this nursery?
Well, it wasn't my plan. I honestly expected that they would just apologise and that would be the end of the matter. But within seconds, I soon realised that these parents, 2 adults who I had in front of me, the nursery staff, the manager and assistant manager, that they did not have a clue, despite all of their experience in safeguarding training, they have no idea how to decide what is age appropriate. They think it's up to the child and whether the child understands it to be sexual. So as soon as I realised that, I thought, I can't leave her here. I just can't leave it. I don't trust you anymore with my daughter. What else has she seen? So, I mean, we argued the case. It was a very fractious, very difficult conversation. There was lots of emotion on their part, and they really did try to play the whole, you're being offensive, what's wrong with these images, he's just expressing himself, which really did try to play that card, and that just didn't wash with me at all. And then I took her out to the nursery and submitted a complaint to the trustee.
Well, I have to say, quite right too, Will. Thank you for coming on and sharing that rather disturbing story, but it's one. But we need to talk about this stuff, and we need some real change. Thank you. Now, debanking. No, it's not just a British phenomenon. It's happening here in the USA too, and today has brought a debanking story. Yep, there's a charity called the Indigenous Advanced Ministries. They're based in Memphis. They are a religious charity, deeply religious group of people, and they have received a letter from Bank of America telling them that their business type we have chosen not to service. Bank of America do not want this Christian charity's business anymore. What does this Christian charity do? Well, they send people and aid and money to orphans in countries like Uganda. But they're being cancelled because they're fundamental Christians, they don't believe in abortion, they don't believe in gay marriage, and clearly, rather like myself with Coots, albeit for different issues, they don't align with the values of the bank. And it is for these reasons, and we'll see how he performs tomorrow, but it's for these reasons that I do find Vivek Ramaswamy such an interesting character. He's written a book called Woke Inc., and he talks about how this tide has gone through corporate America, this politically correct tide, everything to do with identity, with climate change, with everything else. And he says what a negative effect it's having on the American economy. We've got exactly the same disease, so I will be asking over the next couple of days, I will be asking prominent Americans what they make of debanking happening on this side of the pond. Now, joining me down the line live from the London studio is the ever energetic Patrick Christys. Patrick, what have you got coming up for us this evening?
Well, Nigel, it's a pleasure to hand over back to Tom Cruise over there in America. Remarkable stuff. But look, on more serious matters, a man who was given a life sentence for a crime he says he doesn't commit is going to be with me on this show, telling me what life will be like as a child killer for Lucy Letby in prison. Harry Redknapp joins me to discuss the Lionesses snubbing their fans. I've got a drag queen on to talk about that bondage book for 4-year-olds, which is absolutely insane, if you ask me. Deviant behaviour, and taxpayers will end up footing a £6 billion a year bill for illegal migrants. Why? Because we can't deport anybody. So there we go. All to play for tonight, Nigel.
Excellent, Patrick, thank you. And I'll be back with you live from this same location tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. UK time. And we're getting ready for this debate. There are 8 of them in this runoff, and with or without Trump, there's going to be, his presence will still be felt very strongly on that stage. So until 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, live from here in Wisconsin. Let's have a look. I wonder whether the weather is as nice at home as it is here.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Tomorrow, most places will have a fine day. Some places seeing quite a bit of sunshine, others staying fairly cloudy. The warmest conditions in the south, close to this area of high pressure. We've had a bit of a north-south split today. The low further north has been bringing more clouds and a fair few showers. Still some of those around this evening, particularly across central and southern Scotland, but clearing away, so most of us will have a dry night. There'll be some lengthy clear spells, perhaps clouding over somewhat across South Wales as we head through the early hours. It'll be another warm night in the south, but A bit colder than last night further north. Temperatures certainly across northern Scotland well down into single figures. But it should be a bright start here, maybe the odd shower over the Northern Isles. We'll see more showers through the day across western Scotland and small cloud across the western half of Wales with some light rain and drizzle possible, particularly so through the morning. But a good part of southern England, eastern England and northern England seeing some decent spells of sunshine. A warmer day across the northeast of England too. Warmest in the south, 25-26 degrees. Where it's cloudy, temperatures more likely to be in the high teens. Now, Thursday's a bit of a mishmash. Rain clearing away from Scotland and Northern Ireland, brightening up here, but there is the potential for some heavy showers across the south. Just a risk at this stage. Got plans in the south on Thursday. Keep up to date with the forecast. Still quite warm and humid here. Again, elsewhere temperatures high teens or low 20s. Bye for now.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here.